Now that is some stunning box art. I can kind of understand why they did it, though. Venus Senki was supposed to be part of a whole multimedia blitz, so you really only need the name and logo to sell it. There was just one minor problem. Everything kind of fell apart on them. Originally, Venus Senki was a comic, but that comic doesn't matter very much. The reason for that is that the comic's creator was Yoshikazu Yasuhiko, one of the central figures behind Gundam. And so a choice was made to turn Venus Wars into the premier science fiction animated movie of 1989. The movie is terrible. It was also an enormous bomb. And 6 months after that fiasco hits theaters, along comes the Famicom game. The plot of Venus Senki is that a sports team / motorcycle gang gets drafted into a war between two continents on a terraformed Venus. The game is a mixture of strategy game, as you move your units around a map, and action game, which is how you resolve the combat. There's also some RPG elements, as members of the gang get experience points as they destroy enemy units, and they'll level up, increasing their stats. The goal on every map is to wipe out all of the enemy forces. You always have the same units, and even if they're destroyed in combat, they'll come back for the next mission. You have 8 members of the gang, and 2 supply trucks. You take turns moving all of your units. So you move everything on your side, then the enemy moves everything on their side, and you repeat. Every unit has their own movement points, and of course some terrain is more difficult to move through. Moving costs energy, and if you run out of energy, you're stuck in place. The other numbers for the characters are how many missiles they have, and how many experience points. You also have a life bar to track your health. When your turn ends, any of the gang that are next to a supply truck recovers some energy, life, and missiles. There are maximum quantities of those that increase with their level. Moving on top of an enemy unit initiates battle. The battles occur on a 60-second timer. When time runs out, win or lose, the battle is over, and whoever initiated the battle goes backwards 1 square. You win the battle by taking out the 10 main units of the force. These are either going to be helicopters or tanks, and you can tell what they'll be from the icons on the map. In combat, they'll be the purple flashing dots on your radar. You'll also encounter some people on motorcycles during these fights, and they're just worth some experience. The A button fires your machine gun, which you have an unlimited amount of, while the B button fires a missile. The missile will home in on targets and usually destroy them in 1 hit, though at the start you won't have 10 missiles to use. The enemies appear randomly, and as a result of that, you might not be attacked by 10 of the enemies that you have to defeat. In that event, there will have to be another attack to finish them off. These action segments are not good. They're simultaneously annoyingly simple and frustrating. Enemies always come at you slightly on the right, so you'll be pulling to the right throughout the combat, but there's a limit to how far to the right you can go, so you'll have to push back against that. And there's very little variety in enemy attacks. Some of the tougher tanks weave back and forth as an evasion pattern, and some of the gang with weaker attacks might require 2 hits to defeat a tough unit. But that really is not a lot of variation. And fighting the helicopters is just annoying. You have to push down on the control pad to make your bike do a wheelie, and then it can fire up into the air. You don't have to do that with missiles, just the regular gun. Because of how your gun works and the way that the enemies spawn, you pretty much have to just drive straight at them. You can pull a little bit to one side, but you're going to be taking a lot of shots straight to the face. If your supply units get attacked, they defend themselves just by rolling randomly. You'll want to avoid this not only so that you don't lose your supply unit, but because they're taking away valuable experience from your gang. There is some small variation in the terrain that you fight on, and when you fight on bumpy ground, sometimes you can jump up into the air, but I had that occur once during my hour of play. Progress through the game is saved using a password, which you'll get after every battle. A real problem with Venus Senki is that the optimal strategy is obvious. In fact, I suspect a few of you probably have already figured it out. There's no time limit on the tactical map. You can take as many turns as you like. So what you'll want to do is move everybody in these slow blocks. 4 gang members around every supply truck. There's no tactical considerations of terrain or support, so you can just let the enemy come to you, and then you destroy them at your leisure. You'll have plenty of missiles to use after all. Venus Senki is a pretty bad game. The combat is so repetitive and shallow. There's no variation or power-ups. You do the exact same thing from fight to fight. The big difference is whether or not you have to pull a wheelie to hit the targets, and that just makes the combat worse. There's no tactical considerations on the strategic map. For at least the first 2 missions, I could have just parked myself at my starting locations, waited out the whole thing, and there would have been absolutely no difference. I did spot a neutral unit on the 3rd map, but by that point I was out of time, and an hour in the game is pretty late for trying to shake things up. I guess in an odd way, it's a bit appropriate that such an awful movie got such an awful game.